The main thing that we learn from this section of the gospel is that for Jesus to be truly the Christ, then he must suffer and die to complete what he came to do, which is to bring forgiveness of sins for his people. He must do that first before he can be raised to life. It follows then that his disciples, those who follow after him, must accept that and depend upon that, but also in some lesser way to follow that same pattern, giving up things now for the sake of Jesus in order to gain life later. This part of the gospel really divides into two. In one part, we've got Jesus on the way to Jerusalem. That's chapter 16 through to the end of chapter 20. And here we're learning much more about how Jesus has to go to the cross, has to suffer and die before being raised again. And we're finding out much more about what it looks like in practice to follow him on that path, both individually and corporately as a church. The second part really runs from chapter 21 and to 22. This is where Jesus actually arrives in Jerusalem and then confronts the religious authorities who are opposed to him. And the important thing to see here really is that while it might look like those authorities are putting Jesus on trial and questioning his authority and asking all sorts of detailed and hostile things of him, actually it's all the other way around. What Jesus is exposing is their lack of authority, their unbelief, and exposing their kind of barren and dismal faith, the fruitless faith. And while he's exposing all of that, that encourages us to make sure that we're firmly on his side, not on their side, and to prepare to stand with him against the hostility. One of the hardest little episodes to understand in this section of the gospel is the part which only Matthew includes of about the temple tax. This is where Peter is asked whether his master and himself pay the temple tax. It turns out he doesn't have to, but he should do anyway so as not to cause offence. What is that all about? Well, it's quite exciting actually, because when you look back into what the temple tax was all about, it was about paying atonement money to the temple to ransom people's lives after there had been a census. So that's what the temple tax does. Now later on, just a couple of chapters later, we discover that the reason why Peter no longer has to pay that tax is that Jesus has paid his ransom for him. I was very much struck afresh going through this section of the gospel at just how much Jesus has taken on for my sake, dying for a ransom for me. It did strike me afresh just what an amazing thing that is. But also left this section of the gospel somewhat trembling, just realising the scale and scope of what I'm expected to face as well in the Christian life.